I'm Scott Allen Miller. This is my life living in Leon, Nicaragua. Today, we're going to answer important questions about the Rentista visa program here in Nicaragua. Questions such as, what the heck is a rentista and what does that mean? These are important things that you probably need to know. And there's a lot of information for the average person who's considering a long-term, meaning longer than tourist, stay in here in Nicaragua that you probably want to know about the rentista. This is the most important of all the visa programs that are available to you. It may not be the one that applies to you, but you certainly need to know about it because it's going to be the core of your decision making. So what is it? When do you use it? How do you think about it? And how do you approach it? Especially for non-Americans, because it is the standard process for Americans, but it is an unusual one for the rest of the world. Why? We're going to answer all that right after the bump. I had an email exchange this week with someone who's looking at the pensionado program for retiring here in Nicaragua, and it didn't apply to them. It wasn't going to work, but I believe that the rentista would. And this brought up a lot of questions as to a misunderstanding of what the rentista is, how it applies, and how to approach it. So that brings up this topic today, but it is one that comes up quite a lot because the term rentista, while it is the same in English as it is in Spanish, is not at all well known, and people often misassociate it because it's not a commonly used word in English with rent, which it is not. It is not what it means. It has nothing specifically to do with rental income. And so people often ask me questions that make me believe they are confused about this. It's hard to know because very rarely do they give me good feedback. But people will ask me, what type of rental does it need to be? And all kinds of questions that only make sense if they are confused and believe rentista means landlord, which it does not. So let's start with there. But if you, like this person, need to get in contact with me privately, you can find my email in the show notes, along with my social media and other ways to contact me, as well as ways to sponsor the show, such as buying me a coffee or joining the community here. And there's information on how to send in questions of your own as a video, all in the show notes. Go check it out. Okay, so let's start by what is a pensionado, because this gives us a foundation. The pensionado visa refers to people who have a pension. Now, there's limits, so you can't just have any pension. You can't have a $20 pension and have that count. You need to, if you're coming to Nicaragua and looking for a resident visa, that is a long-term resident visa, no longer a tourist, no longer doing border runs, the most commonly thought about program is the one that we think of as retirement, and pensionado is thought of that way because in most of the world, but not the United States, we often use the term pensioner as a replacement for retiree. But that's not accurate because a pensioner is a person who is probably retired but receiving a pension. But in the United States, the average person who's retired does not receive a pension. The average American doesn't even know what a pension is, but they've heard the word, and this leads to a lot of confusion. But here in Nicaragua, it's not the United States, so retirement planning systems are often associated with pensions. So the visa that is designed specifically for retirees is called the pensionado, and it requires a pension or something that behaves as a pension. Americans do have something that behaves as a pension. It is known as Social Security, but it is relatively uncommon, or common enough that Social Security will not be significant enough to count as a full pension, that many Americans can't use that. So generally, Americans don't look at the pensionado. Some do, absolutely, especially those that are coming from programs that actually do have pensions, such as retired teachers, retired police, and other public officers. They're likely to have pensions. And some people in unions will have pensions, but the average American will not. So probably this is not going to apply to you unless you have a Social Security income already that is greater than $1,000 USD per month. If you do have that, then this is probably the visa that you will look at. But that's what it comes down to. You need to have a pension-based income. Pensions are guaranteed incomes of $1,000 a month or more. So for most people around the world, especially Europeans, Canadians, most countries, if you have a retirement, it's probably in the form of a pension, and you need to have the equivalent of $1,000 US per month to qualify for the pensionado. You also have to be over 45 and a few other minor requirements, but very few people, but some, very few people are not over 45 when they're retired. If you are, say, 35 and retired, get a lawyer, talk to them about options, have them present your case. I still think you'll have no problem, but the official numbers are 45. anytime anytime you just solve and you meet all the requirements of the visa, just go for it. Anytime you don't assume that you're going to have a problem. Get an immigration attorney and let them figure this out for you. Nicaragua's not in the business of keeping out good retirees who want to live in their country. That's not what they want to do. But they're trying to come up with sensible visas that make sense. So a lawyer can talk to Migración, they can talk to you, they can look at your different things, and sometimes they can shuffle things around on your side because, and this is what we found with the person who was talking to me, they may not have had the pension that they needed, but they did have other things that they needed. They just didn't understand how they could move their money around to meet the requirements. They just had it in a form currently that isn't applicable to the forms, but they had enough money that they could simply put it into a different type of account and then qualify. These are important things that you just need to know sometimes. And you are able to have private pensions, but pensions don't return the maximum retirement value. So if you aren't forced into a pension, you generally don't want them. This is actually an area where I feel the United States does something better. In general, retirement in the United States is pretty crappy. It is not a country known for good retirement programs. But the fact that they don't use pensions isn't one of them. The fact that they don't have good alternatives to the pension is one of them. But pensions themselves, I don't think are a great idea because what they do is they guarantee that you will have a stable income, but not a maximum income. And so they cater to the unintelligent, they cater to the lack of self-control, they cater to trying to keep money in the government rather than giving it to the people at its maximum value. And of course, it sounds good, and people will make the plea, oh, but people who need pensions, they need to have stable income. Getting maximum money doesn't matter. Predictable money matters, and that's one of those life rules that I have, right? Never refuse to give someone rope because you think they might hang themselves. If they say, I'm going to hang myself, don't give them a rope. But if you're just like, they're too stupid to use a rope to climb, they're going to hang themselves because they're just dumb, any mistake they ever make, anything that ever happens to them is on you, not on them, right? You've condescended, and that's not okay, right? You always save those who want to help themselves. Never put them at risk because you hypothesize that someone else won't. It's just a bad way to go. So the pensionado, as common as it is really not for Americans in most cases. Again, if you qualify for it, great. But so that's the pensionado. We kind of need that as a framework to understand what the rentista is. So what is a rentista? A rentista generally refers to dividend-based income. That is income from investments that comes in not through salary, but through the payment of dividends. And this could come in a lot of different forms. For Americans, this is very normal. We're used to investing in this manner, being just a part of everyday life. When we talk about 401ks, IRAs, Roth IRAs, or just investing, we're talking about getting dividends. And this could apply to having private equity investments or publicly traded stocks or mutual funds or index funds or any type of commodity fund or real estate, both development or as a landlord. Now, because of this last one, a lot of people associate the term rentista with the term rent, and certainly there is a linguistic connection, let's be fair, but there is no direct connection that rentista means rent, just that rent is one of many forms of dividends that counts as a rentista. So for the majority of Americans, the idea of a rentista is going to be provided by something that we would generally consider to be a retirement account. That retirement account could be any of those things that I mentioned or others. Something that you put your money in and a dividend is returned to you. And you can see this in the United States, if that's where you're from, that it'll be classified as a dividend and be taxed in that manner, whereas a salary is taxed differently. Now, this is a bit of a problem for those who are living in Nicaragua full time, because if you are aware of the American tax system, dividends are taxed normally when you live abroad because the money is not earned abroad. It is earned in the United States, so taxed as if it's in the United States. But salaries that you are paid are taxed as if you are outside the United States, which you are. And so they're taxed differently, generally zero or greatly diminished, depending on your situation. We have lots of videos to go into that. We're not here to break down the tax differences, but this is an important way of looking at dividends and understanding when it's a dividend versus salary. Generally, salaries are pretty straightforward for Americans. They come on a W-2. A dividend comes on a form from your investment firm or as a return from a company in which you are an owner. Now, you can be the owner of a private company. Many people are familiar with LLCs. You can go form an LLC anytime you want. You can take anything that you are doing normally and put it into that LLC and receive dividends from that. That LLC could be holding stocks or real estate investments and paying you as a dividend. That's one manner in which it could work. It could also be that you form an LLC, you go to physically work at it, and by law, technically, you're supposed to be being paid a salary at some point, but you can reduce your salary as much as you reasonably want and then pay anything extra as a dividend, and this could be a way to get those dividends high enough to qualify for a rentista. So let's break that down a little bit. So the requirements for a rentista are basically the same as the pensionado. However, rentista tends to return more money. The same amount of retirement investment going in will return, on average, more returns than a pensionado. So we expect, on average, better results just because it has lower overhead. So it's just not paying people to make your risk go up, right? Or to protect you from fluctuations. And so that gives you, so with the pensionado, yes, you get that predictability, but it comes at a cost. And with rentista, you don't have that predictability and you give up that cost, but it's less predictable. So for the rentista, Nicaragua expects 25% more as the amount that you'll be receiving. So instead of having a limit of $1,000, it's $1,250 per month that you need to show for a period of time in the past having come in. Now, you may be able to have some fluctuation in there. The amount of time that it needs to come in is something that changes. Your lawyer or your researchers can look at the exact numbers that you need to have at exactly the time that you're going to apply for your visa. But that's the idea, that you have dividends coming in that you can show over time. And they could be any combination of things. You could have a bunch of different investments and have $10 here, $100 here, $20 here, and they all accumulate to more than $1,250 per month over a period of time. Or you could have them all accumulate through an LLC or a corporation that's then paying you a dividend of all of those combined. Certainly that's allowed. It's all just different ways of reporting it or showing it on paper. You pay the same taxes. You're showing the same amount of money. There's no trickery here. It's just convenience versus reporting mechanisms and so forth. Or you could simply have a single investment. For example, you may have an index fund with Vanguard, have an S&P 500 index that we talk about on the channel a little bit. You could put a bunch of money into there and show the dividends coming out of that as being that kind of number. And to do that, you would need somewhere around $200,000 per month on average, not per month, $200,000 in something like an S&P 500, and you may be able to return a dividend significant enough to qualify based on that alone. Now, what if you have some pension and some rentista? Generally, it is accepted that pension or pensionado income will be counted as a rentista income. Meaning, if you have, say, $800 coming in through a pension, and you can show that, that's not enough for a pensionado, so you need to do something to make it up. Well, they're not going to punish you if you have almost enough with a pensionado and almost enough with a rentista. That pensionado can count towards a rentista, so you only need to make up $425 per month. So if you have private investments or whatever that's paying dividends of at least $425 per month, you add that to the pension of $800, and you're showing a rentista of $1,250. I'm completely convinced that there will never be a problem with that case. Just claim your pension as a rentista, and honestly, they have no way to know it's not. And why would they ever care? It's better for them anyway. So it's all about making a rational example that you have sufficient funds to be able to survive in the country and to be a positive contributor. That's what they're looking to do with this. Otherwise, the rules are basically the same. The rentista does also assume you're basically retired. You're certainly allowed to do other things. You're allowed to work remote and have a huge salary if you want. Not a problem at all. And in fact, they would love for you to do that. What they want to show is that you are over 45 and stable and have a good, reliable future in which your income is essentially guaranteed, whether through a pension or through investments, doesn't matter. They just have two different visas depending on which one you need to show. So that's why the rentista is that way. Now, of course, you could have houses and apartments that you rent out and you collect rent and show that as a rentista because you could pay that through a dividend. But be careful, if you take that money and pay it to yourself as a salary to get the tax benefits, it won't be visible as rentista. So it's not that you have rent. That is not what we're talking about. It's rentista, and you have to show it as rentista. So And someone's going to get confused. What do you mean? Rentista is dividends. That means a business is paying you from the profits at the end of the year or end of the quarter or end of the month, however. And you get to average these things over time. If you get your dividends only once a year and it's, significant, $20,000, you can go and say, see, $20,000 every year, and spread out over the months, that's more than $1,250 a month. Yep, no problem. But if you show just $200 of dividends coming in and you say, but I have the salary of $2,000 per month, they're going to say, no, sorry, that doesn't count. Now, you may be able to make an argument. This is where having an immigration lawyer may make sense because they're going to be able to go to Migracion, have conversations with them, and potentially argue your case and say, look, you should be treated as a rentista because it's a reliable salary that comes in over time, and they're a professional who's reliably able to replace this job should they lose it. And that may be accepted. Of course, that is all up to Migracion. It's completely at their discretion. So make the argument, right? The thing that I tell people all the time is stop evaluating the rules and ruling yourself out. If you're ruling yourself out, I assume you are making mistakes. The system is flexible. The system wants you to be here. And consistently, I talk to people who are like, I don't qualify, but they're not looking at all the options and not putting together the different pieces. They're looking at a random one option and saying, oh, I don't qualify for that. For example, looking at the spousal visa and saying, but I'm not married. And then they don't qualify for that. Well, of course, that's why there's other visas for you. Now, if you really don't qualify for any of those other things, you can use the investment process. That's different than the rentista. Rentista is external investments, right? You can be any amount as long as the return on it is $1,250 a month or more demonstrably. If you are going to invest in the country, that is an investor visa. So it's very different than the rentista. Rentista, external investments, and your viability is based on the returns of those investments. If you are doing an investment visa, then it is local, and it is based on the amount of the investment, not on its returns. They actually don't care too much if you have returns. It's the money going into the economy, not the money that you are pulling out of it, that is of value to them. So in all these cases, they're looking for your value or your safety level to the people of Nicaragua, that you are going to be beneficial for them and not becoming a drain on the system. They don't want you on the dole. They don't want you on welfare. They don't want you to become a burden on society because you didn't have enough resources to survive here. They don't want to have to feed you, clothe you, house you, and so forth. Nicaragua doesn't have excess financial resources to throw at foreigners. Anything they have extra, they need to throw at their own people. Most countries are in the same boat. It's always their own people that they have to take care of, but some rich countries, Norway, the United States, Switzerland, and so forth, don't really need to give anything more to their own people. Their people are doing just fine, and so helping immigrants is something they could at least consider doing. Places like the U.S. may not actually do it, but they certainly could consider it, and it wouldn't be a burden on society in any meaningful way. But in Nicaragua, any foreigner that they're going to help feed is a Nicaraguan who's not getting food. That is, every single thing that you take out of the system comes out of someone's mouth. So they're not going to let that happen. They're going to do everything they can to evaluate you and make sure that you are not going to become that kind of burden. And that's all you're really looking to demonstrate. You want a solid way of demonstrating that you are reliable and safe to the country. And so that is the process. If you clearly meet all the obligations of any one of these visa types, feel free to apply on your own and not to use a lawyer. A lot of people recommend that. It's a lot cheaper for sure. It's not that much work. You can certainly do it, and people do it all the time very successfully. If you don't qualify as any of these things, and especially if you don't speak Spanish, I highly recommend getting a qualified immigration lawyer, talking with them and getting their ideas, because they have seen these different things done. They know how to make these arguments, and they can also talk to you about what you can do to maneuver things. Now, what I had the conversation recently about was someone who has a certain amount of money in their bank account, but they don't have investment income coming in. This is a general retirement failure just across the board. Money sitting in a bank account is eroding. It is not helping anyone. Your money is not working for you. So regardless of what Nicaragua needs, that money should be in an investment account of some sort and gaining interest, gaining something, even if it's bonds, even if it's something to just hedge against inflation, if nothing else, but better, something that's invested in actually putting your money to work and earning some returns. So that's just general. You never want any amount of money resting in a bank account for any amount of time. That's super dangerous from an investment perspective. If you have enough money, and this was their theory that, well, can I show, and people always have these questions, can I buy a house and show value that way? No, that is not considered. Can I show bank accounts and show value that way? No, that is not considered. Why aren't they considered? Because if you could buy a house, you can show that you have the financial resources in some other way. For example, by investing. If you have money sitting in a bank account, that is sufficient enough to make the country feel that you have the protections you need then you have enough money in that bank account to do something wise with it, such as putting it into an investment account and having the returns that you need to show that you are viable. If your money is just sitting in a bank account, what it tells Nicaragua is that you have X amount of dollars, potentially no source of further dollars, and you are not using common sense, and it could disappear any moment. You're an extreme high risk. Even if you have $200,000 sitting in a bank account, if that's all you're doing with it, you're actually demonstrating why they shouldn't take you, not why they should. But if you took that same $200,000 and moved it into an investment account, for example, the S&P 500 index fund that I mentioned earlier, I'm not saying that's the one you should do. It's just a great example because we talk about it a bit. There's many different types of choices, including real estate, right? There's lots of things. Put it into any type of account that's going to give you dividends. And if you had enough money, you will get those dividends. But the difference is, if you just keep the money in the bank account, it just disappears over time as inflation destroys it. If you put that money into the investment account, regardless of Nicaragua's requirements for doing so, it will start paying you a surviving amount of money without you having to do any work. Simply by storing your money in the right place instead of the wrong place, you will have enough money to live on. So not only does it magically provide Nicaragua the example and the demonstrable income that you are a safe bet, it also, for zero money, gives you a permanent income that you can live on. That's a really big deal. So understanding that your resources, whether it's you have real estate somewhere, you have cash in a bank account, you have different types of investments, and things like your 401k will count because you can use them. So feel free to use those to demonstrate that you have significant financial income. Just because your rentista shows that you make more than $12.50 a month in dividends does not mean that you have to use it, right? You can live off of a salary. You can live off of cash that you have in a bank account. You can live off the land if that's what you want to do. The only thing that Nicaragua is trying to demonstrate is that you don't have to. You have a source of permanent income that will keep you surviving throughout your retirement. That's what they want to know. When you can't work anymore, do you have a continued source of income? And that's what that demonstrates, right? Pension or rentista show that you don't have to put work in to get the money out, or nearly so. So that is the idea. That is why. So both the understanding behind the scenes and the practical how to take advantage of it. So that's what a rentista visa is. Of course, if you're young, you're 30 years old, and you're doing these things, and you have this income from a rentista, and you want to be retired, again, use a lawyer and try to make an argument for it, or simply take $30,000 and do an investment in the country and do it that way, and get around needing to go through a retirement focused style of visa. Those are your options. But I think in most cases, you'll probably be able to make an argument that, look, I retired early, here's reasons, and they'll go through things, right? Medical records, employment histories and such. They know what things are accepted. That's why you work with a lawyer when you don't just cleanly fit into a category. Thanks for joining me. Like and subscribe. If you'd like to help support the channel, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Scott Allen Miller. And as always, go into our show notes, check out all the things we got there, including our GoFundMe to help my producer, Marcela, with her stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma. We're raising money to help her take care of her kids. She's a single mom. And yes, her health care is completely supplied by the country of Nicaragua, or almost entirely supplied, very, very close to it. But she does have a lot of ancillary expenses because she's a single mom and she has to go to Managua to take care of her chemotherapy, but she lives here in Leon. Her kids have to go to school in Managua because they have to, it's complicated. So every little bit that you guys can give makes a huge difference for her and her family for sure. Also, anything you need, contact me, social media, all those things in the show notes, and you can send in your questions in the comments or go in the show notes, and there's a way to send in a video question. Love putting you guys on the show, and I can answer that. It's a great way to engage. Remember, on Thursdays, we try to do a live stream every week. It's a lot of fun, great way to engage with everyone, just a fun way to spend the evening and get real-time answers and interactions from me and others about Nicaragua and across Latin America and relocating and all that stuff in general. And as always, like, subscribe, tell someone about the show, post on social media, go link it on Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever, and I will see all of you tomorrow.